And welcome. We are live in the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is a CNN presidential town hall, the first with President Joe Biden. I'm Anderson Cooper. President Biden is just 4 weeks into his presidency and facing multiple crises. Nearly 500,000 of our fellow citizens, Americans, have died from COVID-19. Millions out of work right now, and a nation dangerously divided. Tonight, we're going to be answering questions from the American people. The president will be answering questions from the American people on his first official trip since taking office. Some of the questioners here voted for him, some did not. The president and I will not be wearing masks on this stage. He, of course, has been vaccinated. Over the past several weeks, I've repeatedly tested negative for coronavirus, as recently as yesterday and this morning as well. We will, however, be keeping our distance from one another, and the audience is very limited, socially distanced, and all wearing...
They had to make sure that they were like very specific about how they didn't have to wear a mask because they hit all the proper regulations. Because I'm pretty sure he just signed like a fucking executive order or something saying that like, hey, everybody has to wear a mask. And then like right after that, he didn't have one on, which makes sense. Like he was by himself. It's whatever, but it's like silly. It's funny.
Wearing masks when they're seated.
Just put the microphone inside the mask, dog.
With that, I want to welcome the 46th President of the United States, President Joe Biden.
Make the mask a giant microphone.
Hey, Anderson.
All right, sir.
Good to see you, man. Hey, folks. How are you? Good to be back, man.
It's nice to see you, sir.
I don't believe that Biden got this standing ovation. Biden is... It's crazy how Biden was nobody's choice, but like Trump was. You know what I mean? Like Trump really, like people actually chose Trump. Nobody like chose Biden. You know what I'm saying?
And you know you enjoy being home with the baby more. And I don't want to hear that.
What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck is Joe Biden talking about? He just walked on stage and he said, I know you wish you were with your baby. You know it. It's like, yeah, but this is a weird thing to bring up.
Months, so I'm very happy.
No. Everybody knows I like kids better than people.
I saw a picture of you with your parents.
Did I miss something? Homeboy, we just started we're like 4 seconds into the talking. And he's like, hey, he unpromptedly, I gotta rewatch it because maybe I'm wrong. Did I miss something?
Recently is, with that, I want to welcome the 46th President of the United States, President Joe Biden.
Hey, Anderson.
All right, sir.
Good to see you, man. Hey, folks. How are you? Good to be back, man.
It's nice to see you, sir.
And you know you enjoy being home with the baby more. And I don't want to hear that.
I do, yes. Yeah, he's not.
It was like kind of random. He's like, hey, it's good to see you. I know you wish you were with your kid.
2.5 months, so I'm very happy.
No. Everybody
I love kids a lot.
knows I like kids better than people.
I saw a picture of you with your...
2 things. Biden loves kids. We already knew that. Also, kids aren't people. So, you know, the pro-choice narrative is getting real out of hand, guys. What's next? 50-week abortions?
Your grandson...
I knew it.
Recently.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we got a lot of questions in the audience. We have about 50 or so people here. They're all socially distanced. We have some folks who voted for you, some folks who did not. And we're going to get as many questions in as possible. Before we get to that, I just want to start with a couple of just big picture questions about the pandemic and where we are right now.
Sure.
New cases of COVID-19, hospitalizations have fallen by half in the last month, so have new cases. That's the good news. There's this potential threat, potential surge from the variants coming down the pike, potentially. When is every American who wants it going to be able to get a vaccine?
By the end of July of this year. When we came into office, there was only 50 million doses that are available. We have now, by the end of July, we'll have over 600 million doses.
I think you need 2 doses. I think he's referring to them like you need 2 doses of it. There's like an initial one and then there's like a secondary one. So that's why like 50 million theoretically would carry 25 million people.
Enough to vaccinate every single American.
But there are 340 million people. So that's not even inherently true, unless I'm incorrect. And he's actually only referring to them each as a singular dose.
Can you say... When you say by the end of July, do you mean that they will be available or that people will have been able to actually get them? Because Dr. Fauci,
They'll be available.
they'll be available.
Be available.
Okay.
Here, look.
Yeah, because like I know in like New York, we threw out a bunch of them because Cuomo's a fucking idiot. And he's like, yeah, we should prioritize people who need them first. I think he was like old people and doctors and stuff, which makes sense. But then like the vaccination expired. So they just went to fucking waste.
What we did, we got into office and found out the supply, there was no backlog. I mean, there was nothing.
And then just to be clear, he just said that we're going to have them, but we're not necessarily going to be able to get them to you.
In the refrigerator, figuratively and literally speaking. And there are 10 million doses a day that were available. We've upped that in the first 3 weeks that we were in office to significantly more than that. We've moved out, went to the Pfizer and Moderna and said, can you produce more vaccine and more rapidly? They not only agreed to go from 200 to 400, then they've
so far none of this, nothing that he's talking about is something that Trump wouldn't have
agreed
done.
to go to 600 million doses, and we got them to move up the time because we used the National Defense Act to be able to help the manufacturing piece of it to get more equipment and so on.
So if end of July, they're available to actually get them in the arms of people who want them, that will take, what, a couple more months?
Well, no, a lot will be being vaccinated in the meantime.
Okay.
In other words, it's not all of a sudden 600 million doses are going to appear.
Is this a collective argument? He's like 600 million altogether by July, I guess?
And what's going to happen is it's going to continue to increase as we move along. And we'll have reached 400 million.
And why the fuck aren't they sitting? I would be sitting down. I'm already tired.
By the end of May, and 600 million by the middle.
I'm tired from
by the
breathing.
end of July. And the biggest thing, though, as you remember, when you and I, no, I shouldn't say it that way, as you remember, but when you and I talked last, we talked about, it's one thing that.
Why would you not remember talking last time? Seems like a personal problem, Joe.
The vaccine, which we didn't have when we came into office, but a vaccinator. How do you get the vaccine into someone's arm? So you need the paraffin, you need the needle, you need the mechanisms to be able to get it in. You have to have people who can inject it in people's arms.
That's been one of the problems, just getting enough people.
Yes, now we have made significant strides increasing the number of vaccinators. I issued an executive order allowing former retired docs and nurses to do it. We have over 1,000 military personnel. CDC is, we have gotten the National Guard engaged. So we have significant number of vaccinators, people who'd actually be there. Plus, we've opened up a considerable number of locations where you can get the vaccination.
I want to introduce you to Kevin Michael. He's an independent from Wauwatosa. He's a mechanical engineer for a vehicle company. Kevin, welcome. Hi. What's your question?
Hi, welcome to Milwaukee.
How you doing?
Good. My question is regarding education.
Yes.
And considering the hybrid and virtual school instruction have been in place for nearly a year now, what is the plan and recommendation to get students back into the brick and mortar buildings? As a parent of 4 children, I find it imperative that they get back to school as safely as possible.
My mother would say, God bless you, son. No purgatory for you.
Who fucked this guy? Look at this guy. You hear what he sounded like? This guy, he doesn't have kids. I'm just kidding.
4 kids home. I really mean it. And by the way, the loss of being able to be in school is having significant impact on the children and parents as well. And
yeah, kids are really depressed. They're not adjusting to online school very well. Then I think part of it's because, 1, kids needs more structure, but 2, teachers are terrible at teaching online.
So what we found out is there are certain things that make it rational and easy to go back to the brick and mortar building. 1, first of all, making sure everybody is wearing protective gear. It's available to students as well as
just put them in a bubble.
As to teachers, the janitors, the people who work in the cafeteria, the bus drivers. Secondly, organizing in smaller pods, which means that's why we need more teachers. Instead of a classroom of 30 kids in it, you have 3 classes in that same of 10 kids each in those. Then I'm making the number.
That is very optimistic. Saying that you're going to cut class sizes into thirds, that theoretically means you need to triple the size of every school. That makes no fucking sense. There's no way. That's a very impractical solution. Because you can't just turn one, like, hey, let's just turn one classroom into 3 classrooms, because then that defeats the purpose of splitting up the class sizes. This is preposterous. What the fuck are we talking about here? This doesn't even make sense. How are you going to do that?
We're up. It might less.
How are you?
It doesn't have to be literally 10.
Like there's no way he believes that. There's no way he believes that. Like we haven't even talked about how expensive it would be for getting more teachers. I'm not even worried about that. You have to triple the size of schools. Could you just imagine that?
And in addition to that, we also have indicated that it is much better, it's much easier to send kids K through 8 back because they are less likely to communicate the disease to somebody else. But because kids in
Well, the real reason that kids K through 8 are okay to go back is because, as Biden has said before, kids aren't people, so he just doesn't give a fuck about them. Got them. Boom.
more as juniors and
Boom.
seniors in high school, they
Boom.
socialize a lot more and they're older and they transmit more than young kids do. It's harder to get those schools open without having everything from the ventilation systems and having, for example, school bus drivers. You know,
We also got to triple the buses that we got, because if we're doing this whole triple thing, I understand what you're talking about with his hybrids, but he's didn't necessarily, like, I know hybrids are a factor, but like, yeah, it's impractical because he just said he's talking about smaller class size. He literally said smaller class sizes. He wasn't really talking about hybrids in that context. He's talking about smaller class sizes, which means we need more classrooms. And then even like, what are you going to do? Same thing with the kids. You're going to put some kids on the bus. Like, you're going to get the triple the buses. Like this is kind of like a rough, like,
we got to make sure that
I don't know, man.
we don't have 60.
And kids are disgusting. I feel like we're better off probably running like a legit hybrid for a while.
Kids or however many would depend on the size of the school bus, sitting 2 abreast in every single seat. And so there's a lot of things we can do. Short.
What the fuck, 2 abreast? I don't know. Maybe he's talking about cutting the sizes of the buses. 2 things. First of all, more money for more buses. But second of all, like, kids don't listen. Like, the kids don't listen on school buses. They're assholes. Like, they're little shitheads. And like, bus drivers don't care. Like, if your kid's acting up on a bus, they don't stop because they know if they stop, they got to go back. They got to work longer. It's a whole process.
And I think that we should be vaccinating teachers. We should move them up in the hierarchy as well.
Well, let me ask you,
Okay.
your administration had set a goal to open the majority of schools in your first 100 days. You're now saying that means those schools may only be open for at least 1 day a week.
No, that's not true. That's what was reported. That's not true.
Okay.
It was a mistake in the communication. But what I'm talking about is I said opening the majority of schools in K through 8th grade because they're the easiest to open, the most needed to be open in terms of the impact on children and families having to stay home.
So when do you think that would be K through 8, at least 5 days a week, if
I
possible?
think we'll be close to that at the end of the first 100 days. We'd have a significant percentage of them being able to be opened. My guess is they're going to probably be pushing to open all summer, to continue like it's a different semester.
Do you think
That, if we explore that idea more, that might be better. I think that, like, with the coronavirus, it gives us, like, we really need to start reconsidering the way that we function. I know that other countries, they run schools all year round. And honestly, I think that maybe we should consider that. I think that we should consider, if we really want to get people back to school, kids back to school, we should consider restructuring. So my way that I would restructure is, I'm sure that there are bullshit classes kids don't need to take that you can get them out of. And you could do like fewer classes or smaller school days, and like no summer break, like 3 months on, 1 month off kind of a thing. Or even just constantly going to school with no breaks, just more like miniature vacations. It's really not that big of a deal. Yeah. Listen, you guys are getting upset. But I think that it's time. It's time for you to go to school the entire year. And honestly, you're saying no because you like having 3 months off. But for one, it would be easier for parents because then they wouldn't have to deal with their fucking kid, you know? But more than that, it's easier. Like, so you guys have like, oh, I have like 9 classes or some, like every whatever. Imagine only having like 6. You'd be able to do better on your schooling. It'd be much better for you guys. You'd have easier. You guys are going ballistic. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you.
That would
to
be
catch
5
up.
days a week or just a couple?
I think many of them 5 days a week. The goal will be 5 days a week. Now, it's going to be harder to open up the high schools for the reasons I said. It's just like if you notice the contagion factor in colleges is much higher than it is in high schools or grade schools.
I want you to meet, this is Justin Belot. He's a high school teacher from Milwaukee.
I'm not trying to be a dickhead. Why are these people so ugly?
He's a Democrat. Justin, thanks for being with us. What's your question?
What do you teach?
So I'm really sorry, Justin. You seem like a...
Teach English, high school
My
English.
wife teaches. God love you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. President. So
I like teachers because teachers are close to kids, and I love kids.
on the same lines with schools. So there's great debate on when to transition to in-person learning. While there are numerous warnings not to be in large groups
It's the
or
same
to
fucking
have
question.
dinner parties or small parties, why is it okay to put students and teachers in close proximity to each other for an entire day, day after day?
Bro, just hold your breath. Like, stop complaining.
With large class sizes and outdated ventilation systems, how and when do you propose this to occur? And finally, do you believe all staff should be vaccinated before doing so?
Well, probably.
Number
yeah.
one, nobody is suggesting, including the
You know, my thing here, here's my thing. If we have vaccinations and they're supposed to be incredibly effective, why aren't we saying let's prioritize getting vaccinations to kids and teachers and like getting them back to school? And saying if you don't get your vaccination, you have to do an online alternative. You know?
CDC in its recent report that you have large classes, congested classes. It's smaller classes,
How?
more ventilation, making sure that everybody has masks and is socially distanced, meaning you have fewer students in one room, making sure that everyone from the sanitation workers
These
is
aren't
working
that practical.
in the laboratories and the bathrooms and do all the maintenance.
This is the
that
same
they
question.
are, in
Like,
fact,
I'm pretty sure this is the third time we're asking this question. Like, Anderson Cooper asked it, the other guy asked it, and then this guy asked like the same question. Like, let's just stop.
able to be protected as well, making sure you're in a situation where you don't have the congregation of a lot of people, as I said, including the school bus, including getting on a school bus. So it's about needing to be able to socially distance, smaller classes, more protection, and I think that teachers and the folks who work in the school, the cafeteria workers and others, should be on the list of preferred to get a vaccination.
I swear to God, big clap.
I want to introduce you to Carrie Ingebrecht, an independent from Oak Creek. Carrie, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Carrie, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Our 19-year-old son was diagnosed with pediatric COPD at the age of 14.
I don't know what that is.
We're told he has the lungs of a 60-year-old.
Damn.
He does all he can to protect himself. Last month, he even removed himself from the campus of UW-Madison as he feels it's safer and he has less exposure here at home. We've tried all we can to get him a vaccine. I hear of others who are less vulnerable getting it based on far less. Do you have a plan to vaccinate those who are most vulnerable sooner, to give them a priority?
Well, the answer is yes, there are, but here's how it works. The states make the decisions on who is in what order.
Questions are so
I
easy.
can make recommendations, and for federal programs, I can do that as President of the United States. But I can't tell the state, you must move such and such a group of people up. But here's what I'd like to do. If you're willing, I'll stay around after this is over, and
maybe I can smell your kid.
we can talk a few minutes and see if I can get you some help.
Let me just ask you,
That was a nice sentiment, though, in his defense.
though, Johnson & Johnson could be authorized, a new vaccine from them could be authorized in a couple of weeks. That would be a big deal.
Yes, it would.
Bringing a lot more vaccines on, millions of more doses to the supply. Once that happens, given the urgency of these variants and the potential threat from them, should states stop giving priority to certain groups and just open vaccine access for everyone?
Well, it depends on how much they have available. I think there still should be priority groups in case.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like I said before, like New York prioritized, but then they wasted a bunch of vaccines. And, like, it's not a good thing. The vaccines have, like, you know, they have an expiration date, in my understanding. So you can't just be like, yeah, fuck it, vaccines.
There are not enough for everyone, available to everybody. And look, we don't know for certain. Let me tell you what my National COVID team has said that the variants, by variants you mean the Brazilian strain, the South African strain, the British strain, London, et cetera. Thus far, there is no evidence that the existing vaccinations available from Moderna and Pfizer do not either make sure that they work as well against the strain in the United States, and there is no evidence that they're not helpful. So if you can get a vaccination, get it whenever you can get it, regardless of the other strains that are out there. There's studies going on to determine is not only more communicable, but do the vaccines not provide helpful protection by getting the vaccine? There are some speculation. I got to be very careful here because millions of people are watching this. It may be that a certain vaccination for a certain strain may reduce from 95% to a lower percentage of certainty that it will keep you from getting.
It may not be as effective.
It may not be as effective
against a variant, but it still would be effective.
Still be effective. So the clear notion is, if you're eligible, if it's available, get the vaccine. Get the vaccine.
You know, I don't know, man. This is like rough because it's like, hey, get the vaccine. But then it's like, if you get the vaccine, you're still going to have to social distance and wear a mask, which I get it, right? But then also, if you get the vaccine, it's new, it's underdeveloped. We don't necessarily know how effective it is. There are multiple strains. It may not be effective on all the strains, but I think it might be effective on them. But I want to make sure that I have plausible deniability. It just questions whether it's like worth getting the vaccine. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
I want you to meet, this is Desi Levy, a Democrat from Milwaukee.
Please don't ask about fucking... Stop asking about the coronavirus.
She's a registered nurse, former academic dean. She's also currently the director of a faith-based nonprofit. Desi, welcome.
Very cool.
By the way, you've heard me say this before, Becky.
You've heard me say this before, Becky. I like kids.
If there's any angels in heaven, they're all nurses, male and female. Doctors let you live. Nurses make you want to live. I can tell you as a considerable consumer.
Every nurse I've ever met made me want to kill myself. What the fuck are you talking about, Joe Biden? Nurses are rude. Always rude to me.
Healthcare. For my family. You're wonderful. Thank you for what you do.
But nurses work really hard. Like, nurses are phenomenal. I'm just making a little bit of a joke.
God bless you. Mr. President, hello. My name is Dr. Desi Levy, and my question to you is, considering COVID-19 and its significant impact on Black Americans, especially here in Milwaukee, and thus the exacerbation of our racial disparities in healthcare, we have seen less than 3% of Blacks and less than 5% of Hispanics given the total number of vaccines that have been administered to this point. Is this a priority for the Biden administration, and how will the disparities be addressed?
Oh, no. Okay, so if I had to make an assumption, right? So what she's saying is, hey, Black people aren't getting the vaccine as much as, like, I guess other people, non-Black people, because she just said Black and Hispanic people aren't getting it, so we could assume that Asian, white, whatever. If we have a priority system that says that we need to get these vaccinations to, I'm pretty sure it's like doctors and teachers, this doesn't show some kind of coronavirus vaccination inequality. This shows that we don't have enough Black or Hispanic people in what we would consider like a necessary field, like a doctor field or like a high risk field, or, you know what I'm saying? Or we don't have a lot of old Black people. I think that like Black people have lower life expectancies. And these are things that aren't going to be solved by who we give the fucking vaccinations to. These are things that are solved through proper income equality and through redistribution of wealth in a positive way, and the access of opportunity. But like the percentage of Black and Hispanic people getting vaccinations is very highly irrelevant here. And to like arbitrarily get more vaccinations to Black and Hispanic people as like a feel good when they may not necessarily be in the fields that they need to be in, it's kind of like a virtue signal.
And that's both locally and nationally.
Well, first of all, it is a priority, number one. Number two, there's two
Poggers
reasons
UBI.
for it being the way it is. Number one, there is some history of blacks being used.
And then also, yeah, there might be a low black turnout. I mean, I don't know how that is. I don't know if it's entirely true, but there might be like a low black turnout to even getting the vaccination for whatever reason. Maybe they don't trust it. Maybe they're just smarter. Because I'm a little shaky about it. I'm just saying, I don't know.
Used as guinea pigs and other experiments, as need not tell you, doctor, over.
But then there also might be the factor of like less accessibility to it, which would again be because like usually you'd have less accessibility in poorer areas. So a lot of this stems from income inequality, not necessarily like vaccine racism.
For the last
which
50
is like
to 75 to 100 years in America. So there's a concern about getting the vaccine, whether it's available or not. But the biggest part of it is access, physical access. That's why last week I opened up, I met with the Black Caucus in the United States Congress and agreed that I would all of the community health centers now, which take care of the toughest of the toughest neighborhoods in terms of.
I really wish his response was, well, I think we need to look at the data as to why people aren't getting the vaccines.
Illness. They are going to get 1 million doses a week, and with how we're going to move forward, because they're in the neighborhood. Secondly, we have opened up, and I'm making sure that there's doses of vaccine for over 6,700 pharmacies, because almost everyone lives within, not always walking distance, but within the distance of being able to go to the pharmacy, like when you got your flu shot. That is also now being opened. Thirdly, I also am providing for mobile vans, mobile units to go into neighborhoods that are hard to get to, because people are for example, even though everyone is within, basically 5 miles of a Walgreens, let's say, the fact is, if you're 70 years old, you don't have a vehicle, and you live in a tough neighborhood, meaning it's a high concentration of COVID, you're not likely to be able to walk 5 miles to go get a vaccine. The other thing we found is, and I'm sorry to go on, but this is really important to me, the other portion is, a lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and the African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccination at the Walgreens or at the particular store. So we're also.
I know people dogged on him for that take pretty hard, but like people, like in general, older people, they're not great with computers, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to shit on him for that.
Committed to spend $1 billion on public education to help people figure out how they can get in there. That's what we're also trying to set up.
Wait, you're going to put $1 billion into public education so that people know how to use their fucking computer to get vaccinations? That seems like a really bizarre statement. That seems like a very bizarre statement to make.
Mass vaccination centers, like places in stadiums and the like.
Are you concerned about the rollout of this online? Because it has been incredibly confusing for a lot of people, not just older people, it's younger people just trying to find a place to get a vaccine.
Yes, and I have, because look.
Just make a YouTube video. You have a really good point with that. Just make a YouTube video, yeah. Like, honestly, not even kidding. Why don't they just make a YouTube video? This is accessible to like everybody with internet.
Look what we inherited. We inherited a circumstance here where, and now for the first, we did a lot.
And like a class to get old people to like learn how to use the website.
In the first 2 weeks, in a circumstance where, number one, there weren't many vaccinators. You didn't know where you could go get a vaccine administered to you because there's no one to put it in your arm.
Not for nothing, but like you could be like, hey, Google, we need you to put together a registry of vaccination centers. And they would probably do it pretty quickly and easily and cheaper than the government could do it. I'm just being honest with you.
Number one. Number two, there was very little federal guidance as to say what to look for, how to find out where, in fact, you could go.
Make a YouTube video.
You can go online, and every single state now has a slightly different mechanism by which they say who's qualified, where you can get the vaccines, and so on. So it's all about trying to more rationalize in detail so people, ordinary people like me can understand. I mean that sincerely. I mean, my grandchildren can use that online, make me look like I'm in the 7th century. But all kidding aside, so this is a process, and it's going to take time. It took us.
I miss Donald Trump. It's so fucking boring listening to this motherfucker talk.
Think of what we didn't do, and you and I talked about this during the campaign. We didn't do from the time it hit the United States. You're going to inject something in your arm. It's going to go away. You're going to be all be down by Easter. We wasted so much time, so much time.
Got another question about vaccines. This is Jessica Solis. She's an independent from Milwaukee, graphic designer. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you.
Get a real job, Jessica. Fucking graphic designer. Idiot. Just kidding.
As we've been talking about, the coronavirus is very real and very scary, and it's especially scary for children who may or may not understand. My children, Layla, 8 here, and my son, Mateo, 7 at home.
Your child definitely ate. You get it? I'm kidding. That's rude. I'm obese. I'm just making a joke. That's fucking mean. But so sorry. Oh. Imagine I try running for president and then people are like, do you remember when you called an 8-year-old fat? And I'm like, I do, and it wasn't appropriate. I'm so sorry.
Often ask if they will catch COVID, and if they do, will they die? They are watching as others get.
Tell your kid probably not. You're 8. Like, you probably aren't going to get it. If you anything, you're going to be a carrier and you're going to kill me. Tell your kid that. Tell your kid, hey, listen, you're young. If you even get it, you're probably going to be asymptomatic, but you might kill me as your parent. That'll make them feel better. Just tell them that.
Vaccine, and they would like to know, when will kids be able to get the vaccine?
Well, first of all, honey, what's your first name?
Layla.
Layla, beautiful name. First of all, kids don't get the vaccine, get COVID very often. It's unusual for that to happen. They don't. And the evidence so far is
like,
children,
why the fuck are you asking Joe Biden this question? Like, just tell your goddamn kid the right thing.
Aren't the people most
like,
likely?
Yeah, you have like a low chance of getting the coronavirus because you're a kid.
To get COVID, number one. Number two, we haven't even
what do you smell like?
Done tests yet on children as to whether or not the certain vaccines would work or not work, or what is needed.
What?
So you're the.
Did he just say? He was like, yeah, young people don't have a high chance of getting it. Also, we don't have a singular fucking clue if it works on you. That's what he just said. He's like, I don't really know if the vaccine's going to even work on you, sweetie. That's supposed to make her feel better. Him being like, I got no fucking idea if it's going to work on you. Well, that really makes me feel a lot better.
Safest group of people in the whole world.
Layla, you got any plans for tonight?
Number two, you're not likely to be able to be exposed to something.
Wait, this is number 3, no?
To mommy or daddy. And it's not likely mommy and daddy are able to spread it to you either.
I don't know about that. If anything, she would be asymptomatic and spread it and kill her parents.
So I wouldn't worry about it, baby. I promise you. But I know it's
so
kind of worrisome. Are you in first grade? Second grade?
Second.
So you're getting old.
You're getting really old. A little too old for me. I'm going to kill those fucking dogs.
Second grade. Well, have you been in school, honey? No. See, that's kind of a scary thing too. You don't get to go to school, you don't get to see your friends, and so what a lot of kids, and big people too, older people, their whole lives have sort of changed like when it used to be. You used to be able to just go outside and play with your friends and get in the school bus and go to school and everything was normal. And now when things change, people get really worried and scared. But don't be scared, honey. Don't be scared. You're going to be fine.
These aren't like the worst messages. They're just so weirdly presented. He's like, listen, baby, the world used to be different and now it's different again. And it's like, what he's trying to say is like, listen, some of the hysteria is coming from the fact that the world has changed very quickly And some people, like, some of it's that, like, it's not necessarily rational. Some of it's just very hyped up. That's what he's trying to say. He's not necessarily wrong. It's just the way he's saying it is creeping me out. Because he's like, hey, Layla, you're 8. You're a little old for me, but I think maybe we could sit in the back of the bus together and make out. Teacher wouldn't see us.
Going to make sure mommy is fine.
That's the vibe
too.
I'm getting.
You know, let me ask you. Let me ask you, just for folks who are watching out there, there are a lot of people who are scared, and there's a lot of people who are hurting. When do you think this pandemic is, I mean, when is it going to be done? When are we going to get back to normal?
Well, you know,
probably not until next year.
All the experts, all the committee that I put together, the leading researchers in the world, in the United States, are on this committee of mine, headed by Dr. Fauci and others. They tell me, be careful not to predict things that you don't know for certain what's going to happen, because then you'll be held accountable. I get that. But let me tell you what I think based on all that I've learned and all that I've studied and all that I think that I know. It's a high probability that the vaccinations that are available today and the new one, Johnson & Johnson, God willing, will prove to be useful, that with those vaccinations, the ability to continue to spread the disease is going to diminish considerably because of what they call herd immunity. And now they're saying somewhere...
Wait, what? He's talking about fucking herd immunity now, motherfucker? Bro, well, didn't Trump get, like, blasted for talking about herd immunity? And now Donald Trump's Trump got blasted for talking about herd immunity, and now Biden's like, hey, you know, there's this thing called herd immunity. Don't know if you've heard it before. Have I heard it? I have. I don't know. I couldn't figure out a good pun. But, like, come on. Come on.
Around 70% of the people have to constitute. Some people said 50, 60, but a significant number have to be in a position where they have been vaccinated and or they've been through it and
have antibodies.
Damn, Anderson's like really just helping him with the answers here.
And so if that works that way, as my mother would say, with the grace of God and the goodwill of the neighbors, that by next Christmas, I think we'll be in a very different circumstance, God willing, than we are today.
That's for sure.
I think a year from now, when it's 22 below zero here, a year from now, I think that there'll be significantly fewer people having to be socially distanced, have to wear masks, etc. But we don't know. So I don't want to overpromise anything here. I told you when I ran and when I got elected, I will always level with you. To use Franklin Roosevelt's example, I'll shoot you, give it straight from the shoulder what I know and what I don't know. We don't know for certain, but it is highly unlikely that by the beginning of next year's traditional school year in September, we are not significantly better off than we are today. But it matters. It matters whether you continue to wear that mask. It matters whether you continue to socially...
Biden really does look like a character from Little Nightmares.
Distance. It matters whether you wash your hands with hot water. Those things matter. They matter. And that can save a lot of lives while we're getting to this point where we get to herd immunity.
You've made passing a COVID relief bill the focus of your first 100 days. Those on the right say the proposal's too big. Some on the left say it's not big enough. Are you committed to passing $1.9 trillion bill, or is that final number still up for negotiation?
I'm committed to pass. Look, here's some of you are probably economists or college professors, or you teach it in school. This is the first time in my career, and as you can tell, I'm over 30, the first time in my career that there is a consensus among economists, left, right, and center, that is and including the IMF and in Europe, that the overwhelming consensus is, in order to grow the economy a year, 2, 3, and 4 down the line, we can't spend too much. Now's the time we should be spending. Now's the time to go big. You may recall I managed the last experiment we had with a stimulus, and it was no, I don't mean it that way, but it was $800 billion. We thought we needed more than that, and we think we did. It ended up working, but it slowed things up by about, and depending who you talk to, between 6 months and a year and a half. We can come back, we can come roaring back. It's estimated that if by most economists, including Wall Street firms, as well as think tanks political think tanks, left, right, and center, it is estimated that if we pass this bill alone, we'll create 7 million jobs this year.
Wow.
7 million jobs this year.
Fantastic.
And so the thing we haven't talked about, and I'm not going to go on because I want to hear your question, I apologize. We haven't talked about, I remember you and I talking during the campaign, and you had the former guy saying that, well, we're just going to open things up, and that's all we need to do. And we said, no, you got to deal with the disease before you deal with getting the economy going. Well, the fact is that the economy now has to be
it
dealt
really
with.
just feels like they're giving him such an easy time. You notice that the lower it is, it throws up the subtitles. The fuck?
40% of the children in
But
America
it really just feels like they're
food
giving him a
shortage.
really
60%
easy time.
Did you ever think you'd see a day in Milwaukee? You'd see in the last 6 months people lining up in their automobiles for an hour or for as far as you could see to get a bag of food? This is the United States of America, for God's sake. We can't deal with that. We promised, look at all the people who are on the verge of being kicked out of their apartments because they cannot afford, they cannot.
You know what's so crazy about this? It's like, hey, there's so many people who are they might get kicked out of their apartments. And Biden doesn't really care. Right. And the reason I say that is because Biden, I think he passed a bill that made it so that you couldn't kick out your tenants if they haven't paid. But then it's what about the landlords? Not every landlord is a fucking living lavish. Landlords do have to work. They have to make sure that your apartment's up to code and they have to deal with any other problems. Right. And it's instead of turning, because what happens is so Biden's yeah, if you don't have the money, you don't have to pay. That's great. But then the landlord is fucked. So now the landlord has to be listen, we need to advocate for ourselves. And so now we look at it as if the landlords are pitted against the tenants. But you're not giving, you know what a better solution to say instead of being hey, landlords, you're not getting paid, is to fucking give money to people so that they can pay their rent. We're overcomplicating this bullshit fucking stimulus package. We really wouldn't need the stimulus if we had a universal basic income. Things would be much more likely to work themselves out. This is just stupid as fuck.
Not afford the rent. What happens when that happens? Everything. Look at all the mom and pop landlords that are in real trouble if we don't subsidize this in the meantime.
Yeah, but you're not talking about subsidizing it. Where the fuck are you talking about?
Look at all the people
you just did a whole thing that just fucks people over. You're hey, those mom and pop people? I fucked them because I told them that they didn't have to get their rent instead of actually give money in a way to make this work. A UBI would be great. Temporary one would be pretty well. This is the perfect time to try a UBI. Do you know how perfect this is to try? This is when we should have been this is it. This is when we should try the UBI out. This could have been the perfect time.
We're on the verge of missing, and how many people have missed their last 2 mortgage payments and are able to be foreclosed on. That's why I took executive action to say they cannot be foreclosed on in the meantime. Because look at what the impact
that I don't give a shit about because we gave banks massive bailouts. So I'm not really worried about that.
And the economy would be. You think it's bad now, let all that happen. Look at all the people who've lost their insurance.
Don't worry, guys. By 2032, there's going to be another crisis, another panic. Because every 10 years, like clockwork, there's a goddamn recession. So I'm going to get elected into the next recession, and then I'm going to turn it around. Boom. UBI.
How many? I'm not asking for show of hands.
By then, my priority by then is honestly, my 2032, I already know what my priority is going to have to be. It's going to be a universal basic income, and it's going to be infrastructure. Because we have horrible electric grids, we have horrible infrastructure grids, we have terrible transportation, and we have terrible fucking electricity in the United States. It's going to be UBI and those two things. That's what it's going to be mostly. And then we're going to make massively positive changes.
How many of you had jobs with corporations or companies that provided health care, the Cobra health care? Well, guess what? The company goes under, and guess what? You lose your health insurance. Well, we should be making sure you're able to pay for that so that we keep people moving. So there's a lot. So I think bigger, and the vast majority of the serious people say bigger is better now, not spending less.
This is Randy Lang, an independent who supported Donald Trump in.
Hey, this is so when they said that they got people who voted for Biden and not, they didn't get like Trump supporters. They got Biden supporters and then progressives that just didn't like Biden and voted third party. Like, this is ridiculous. This is like the only guy that probably like voted for Trump. Let's see what
in 2020. Randy's the co-owner of a woodworking company here in Milwaukee. Randy, welcome.
Randy, give him some shit. You're Biden. Fuck you. I still like Trump. Hey, Trump 2024.
They're proposing a $15 minimum wage.
Thank God.
Given the lower cost of living, specifically in the Midwest, many business owners are concerned that this will put them out of business, forcing them to downsize or cut benefits. How can you instill confidence in small businesses that this will benefit the Midwest?
Look at his face. He's like, oh, I wasn't expecting a real question. I only prepared for the 5 of the same coronavirus question.
Business growth.
Well, first of all, the South is not much different than the Midwest in that regard as well.
Okay, great.
But here's the thing. If you look back over the last 40 years as minimum wages increased,
he's gonna do the meme.
People haven't, the end result of net employment hasn't changed.
You're a fucking idiot. Okay, so do you want to know why Biden's a fucking moron? Okay. Stupidest fucking thing. Throughout history, we've done like rather incremental, small increases to minimum wage. Excuse me. We're going to have to go up more than $2 a year in minimum wage over the next 5 years. Maybe less than $2. $2 a year. Yeah, like a little. Okay, you get my point. So this isn't something that we've historically done. We haven't historically increased minimum wage massively every year for 5 years. Okay, last time minimum wage was increased, I think it was 2009. It's 2021. It should be $8.84 from $7.25. In the past, what is it, 12, 13 years, it should have gone up $1. And you're like, you're telling us that historical data supports that we're not going to see like a massive issue with doubling what we were supposed to do in the last 13 years every year for the next 5 years. This is bullshit, is a bullshit progressive talking point that fucking idiots believe. Hey, historically, when we've increased minimum wage by 50 cents every year, we've been fine. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to triple that. And then we're going to do that for 5 years. And don't worry, because the data supports it. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You're an asshole. You're a fucking asshole. This is just stupid. You're a fucking idiot. Like, at least answer the question honestly. This is such a bullshit talking point. Because $15 an hour minimum wage is going to have the worst impact on the people who need more money the most. It's like, hey, people that are poor, they're going to get hurt by this $15 an hour minimum wage. We're trying to help poor people, right? He's like, yeah, but also go fuck yourself.
The vast majority of the economists, and there's studies that show that by increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, it could have an impact on a number of businesses, but it would be de minimis, et cetera.
Dude, there's like these same people who say that there's a positive impact, which there will be, are the same people who are like, yeah, we're going to lose 1.3 million jobs. 1.3 million jobs are going to be lost to this $15 an hour minimum wage based on these same projections. Based on the same projections. Okay? That's a lot of people, and it's going to be the poorest areas impacted the most. The areas that need it the most. Because like the richer area, like New York already has a $15 an hour minimum wage. It's not going to mean a fucking thing. It's bullshit. This is not the way to go.
Here's the deal. It's about doing it gradually. We're at $7.25 an hour. No one should work 40 hours a week and live in poverty. No one should work.
Okay, but there are better solutions than to be putting small businesses out. It's a nice sentiment, but when your result is not going to be what you're proposing, it doesn't matter. You're like, hey, I think everybody should have a livable wage. I agree. I totally agree. It's why I'm for UBI. But thinking that, like, see, we're at a point now where because of technology, we cannot rely on employment as a source of income 100%. We just can't. Technology is displacing jobs. It's driving down wages. We can't rely on employment alone as the way for people to get money. We need to think outside the box. God damn it. And it's like, yeah, we need to increase minimum wage. No.
40 hours a week living problem. But it's totally legit.
At best, he could be like, hey, maybe we'll think about some kind of a subsidized program. Maybe. Maybe we'll have the government subsidize it, I guess. I just think UBI is better.
For small business owners to be concerned about how that changes. For example, if we gradually increased it.
Bro, this some pork shop guy, I'm going to let you know. This guy just said in my chat, Papa, give us solutions. You're just bashing the idea with no solutions, my guy. I just need you to know something. I don't mean to be mean, but I don't like it when people that don't have the ability to comprehend somebody talking give their input. I talked about universal basic income for the last 8 months, and I've said the word UBI like 17 times in the last 3 minutes since he started this segment. So to tell me that I should give you solutions, the only solution you need is a fucking hearing aid, I think. Or maybe we need to like advocate for Twitch to put some kind of subtitles in here. Because what the fuck? This is all I've been talking about. Shut the fuck up. Oh my god. Hey, you're just shitting on him. I've said UBI like 17 times. It's in my chat. The chat is memeing UBI 40 times over. Look at the chat. If you scroll up through this chat, UBI, God bless you. You understand what I'm saying? All right, so just listen a little bit. Just listen before you speak.
When we indexed it at 720, if we kept it indexed to inflation, people would be making $20 an hour right now. That's what it would be.
No, that's a fucking objective lie. Do you want to hear what this idiot just said?
Indexed it at 7.
Dude, he's just pushing off progressive talking points. He's so fucking dumb.
20. If we kept it indexed to inflation, people would be making $20 an hour.
Nope, that's completely objectively wrong. This is an objective lie. He's lying. He's objectively lying. This stupid motherfucker is objectively lying and nobody's talking about it. Okay? This is what we call an inflation calculator, okay? 2009 was when the last time we increased minimum wage. Okay? It was $7.25 in 2000, not 72, $7.25 in 2009. Okay? This is very basic. Anybody with half a brain can do this, okay? It would be $8.84 right now, based on inflation. This was the easiest thing to fact check. Do you see how fucking stupid? Joe Biden just said it would be over $20 an hour. Look at this.
If we gradually increased it, when we indexed it at 720, if we kept it indexed to inflation, people would be making $20.
No, you're a liar. You know what he's trying to say? The same bullshit leftist talking point people have been talking about the whole time. Okay? Hey, you know, if we scaled wage with productivity, it'd be like $20 an hour. You know why that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard? Because productivity, the massive increase in productivity, wasn't because people became more productive for less money. It's because of technology displacing jobs. We have whole factory towns that lost their jobs because factories were automated. We're not getting more productive because of people. We're getting more productive because of technology, which again is why UBI would be the solution. It's like, Jesus Christ. Oh my god! And like nobody cares. Is anybody actually gonna to contest that?
It's an hour right now. That's what it would be.
The Congressional Budget Office.
I don't know, bro. Part of me is thinking that maybe I should have voted Trump.
Says that a $15 minimum wage would lift 900,000 people out of poverty, but would also cost 1.4 million people their jobs.
Yes, but there's also, if you read
what?
the
Budget Office.
That's much worse than I had thought.
Says that a $15 minimum wage would lift 900,000 people out of poverty, but would also cost 1.4 million people their jobs.
Yes, but
wow, that's worse than I thought. I thought it was going to lift more people out of poverty.
There's also, if you read that whole thing about Pinocchios and all the rest, there are also equal number of studies say that wouldn't have that effect. And particularly
people there
now. That's what it would gradually increase to.
Budget office says that
At 720, if we kept it indexed to inflation, people would be making $20 an hour right now. That's what it would be.
the Congressional Budget Office says that a $15 minimum wage would lift 900,000 people out of poverty, but would also cost 1.4 million people their jobs. Is that?
Yes, but there's also, if you read that whole thing about Pinocchios and all the rest, there are also equal number of studies say that wouldn't have that effect. And particularly as
he's just, bro, if Trump ever did this, if Trump decided to support, which he's done before, one truth over another, he would have been fucking lambasted. Why are we being so nice to this guy? He's literally a moron.
you do it in terms of how gradually you do it. So let's say you said you're going to increase the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour between now and the year 2025 to $12 an hour.
That's 4 years, and it's 2026, you idiot.
To $13 an hour. You double someone's pay, and the impact.
None of those are double pay. Like, I mean, like 14 and a half would be double pay. I just don't know. I just feel like we're losing here.
On business would be absolutely diminished, and it would grow the GDP, and it would grow and would generate economic growth. But it's not illegitimate as a small business person to worry about whether or not increasing it at one fell swoop would have that impact. I do support a 15.
No, but like 5 years isn't enough time to increase the scale. Oh my God. Oh, this is stupid as fuck.
Dollar minimum wage. I think there is equally as much, if not more, evidence to dictate that it would grow the economy.
Bro, everybody's saying that I voted. Yeah, I do. I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay, I voted Biden because I thought that like he was pandering to leftists with a lot of his bullshit. Like I was on board with the healthcare thing because it was decent, but I didn't think he would be stupid enough to agree with $15 an hour minimum wage. I didn't think he was that fucking dumb. I don't know. I just didn't think he was that much of a fucking moron. But, I mean, let's hope it just doesn't get passed.
And long run and medium run benefit small businesses as well as large businesses, and it would not have such a.
Yes, it would. Nothing that you're saying a nice thing. You're not actually. I thought, yeah, you're right. I'm flawed. He's not. He just got like a fucking Anderson Cooper's like, hey, you know, there's some pretty bad estimates out there. Pinocchios to that. Their nose is growing. That was his answer. This is so fucking stupid.
Dilatory effect, but that's a debatable issue.
I want you to meet another small business owner. This is Tim Etchinger, a Democrat from Milwaukee, co-owner of Black Husky Brewing. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. My partner and I own a small brewery in the River West neighborhood of Milwaukee, and we have 9 amazing employees. We rely primarily on selling our beer out of our tap room, and with the pandemic, our business has gone down about 50%. Now, we've relied primarily on loans, grants, as well as our own reserves to survive. However, the new assistance has been too slow, and recently it's gotten more restrictive on how we can apply it. What will you do so that small mom-and-pop businesses like ours will survive over large corporate entities?
Change it drastically. First of all, by making sure we have inspectors general. You may remember when
I love this guy's like, hey, listen, how do we make it so corporations aren't going to fuck us in the ass because they have more money and the ability to sell better? So how do I, as a small business owner, how do I compete? We're going to change stuff. And the first change we're going to make is we're going to make sure you can't afford to pay your workers. So you can suck a dick. And then you have a partner, which means you're probably gay anyway. So you're going to love it. This is Joe Biden talking, not me, okay? Right? You know what's going to happen. $15 an hour minimum wage. This guy's going to go out of business. He's already struggling. And then McDonald's, they're going to be like, we already have the money for technology. We just need a little time. See, this is the thing. Because people are starting to be like, yeah, McDonald's said that they're fine with the minimum wage increase. Why is everybody freaking out? I find it crazy that, like, because they said that. They said, hey, as long as it's done slowly, over 5 years, we're fine. Yeah, it's because their 5-year plan includes automating the fuck out of your job. And I find it crazy that progressives and socialists are like, I hate big business. But then the second a big business advocates for one of their plans, they're like, told you it's good. If a large corporation advocates for your plan, especially a really large one like McDonald's, the biggest fast food chain in the world, you might go, maybe there's something wrong with what I'm thinking, right? Oh God, we're so wrapped in white oppressors in the United States. We're not looking at the true oppressors. Fucking crazy. It's fucking crazy.
In the first bill
By the way, guys, for everybody talking about UBI, I'm gonna have another UBI video coming out today at 6. So
passed,
you look at my YouTube.
you may
for
remember
that.
there was a guy running saying, what's going to happen is the banks aren't going to lend you the money. They're going to ask you a question. Do you have your credit with
I'm
us?
sounding
How many
hella
loans do you-"
conservative. Listen, I'm not sounding conservative. I'm literally, I mean, maybe I am sounding conservative. But bro, I've been sitting here going universal basic income. I'm sitting here telling you guys that the government should be collecting money and giving everybody $1,000 a month. And you're like, you're sounding conservative. I'm sounding like $15 an hour minimum wage is fucking stupid. Okay? That's a terrible idea. His own projections from the fucking whatever, the Congressional Budget Office or whatever, was like, yeah, this is bad. Anderson Cooper's even nicely tapping him on the shoulder going, Biden, you might be a fucking moron. This isn't the right way to go. Just saying, dude.
You have with us? What credit cards you have with us?
Listen. My friend, Zachy, when you said that something about because a lot of racists like him or whatever, with Trump, like, I don't like talking about people like that's in a monolith scenario. Like, not everybody that supported Trump was racist, okay? And I called out Trump as well. But 15-hour minimum wages, listen, here's the thing. Trump was terrible for socially for our country. And his solutions weren't long-term, but he was good for the economy. And as somebody, I personally think that better opportunity in the economy is ultimately what's going to end racism, right? Because black people are underperforming because of lack of opportunity. You give black people money and the opportunity to make money rather than trying to implement classes for, like, if your argument's like white people are inherently racist, a fucking class isn't going to help white people. I want to give people money so that they can reduce their own oppression. Now, I didn't like the way Trump did it, but at least he wasn't shitting on the economy, right? This is an economic disaster. Homeboy's talking about investing $1.9 million. $1.9 million, or trillion dollars, excuse me, into the economy to bring it back, and then also a minimum wage increase at the same time. Makes no sense, bro.
How? Because even though they were being underwritten and we bailed their rear ends out last time out, they weren't. It was too much.
And by the way, the federal minimum wage should just scale with inflation. It should just be $8.84 right now. That's it.
To lend to you. What did the president do? And I don't want to pick on the president. I'm tired of talking about Donald Trump. Don't want to talk about him anymore. But the last administration spent time.
I don't know, bro.
A lot of time talking about how there was no need for inspector generals. We find out that 40% of the money, the PPE loans to go to PPP loans to go to small businesses, went to corporations that were multi-million-dollar corporations. You're going to see an investigation showing that a lot of this was fraudulent where it went. So what I'm doing,
not for nothing, but these loans are kind of irrelevant to, like, what are we fucking talking about? We're talking about how shitty of a job you're probably going to do helping small businesses. The fuck are you talking about loans? Shut the fuck up.
$1 million for you to be able to make capital investments in order to be able to open safely.
Hey, listen, we're gonna make sure we're gonna make sure. Listen, this is what Biden's saying. Hey guys, we're gonna make sure that you are gonna be able to get a loan that you cannot pay back. That's what Biden's saying. Thank you, Joe Biden. That's what I was looking for. I'm sure we need to regulate better, but my priority isn't this.
Position that you can do the things that are recommended. You've noticed there's been very little federal directions for you all as to how to safely open your businesses. Yet, if you're able to test your employees, if you're able to...
What the fuck are you talking about?
Be in a situation, if you serve people, you have plexiglass dividers, if you... A whole range.
Bro, this isn't going to help this guy open his business. What the fuck is happening? This is awful.
If you're able to have everybody with a mask and the like, you can do so much to safely open, but you don't get that direction. So the money, I guarantee you, is going to go to small businesses with people, and I'm shooting, and by the way, the original definition of a small business is 500 or fewer employees. Well, that's not what I mean by small businesses. What we meant by small businesses, the mom and pop businesses that hold communities together and keep people together. and particularly in neighborhoods where if you don't have a beauty shop, a barber shop, a hardware store, a grocery store, et cetera, the center of the community begins to disintegrate some. So what I'd like to do is, if you are willing to give me an address, lay out
Why is the part 2
precisely,
not on
without
there?
taking more time, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm supposed to only talk 2 minutes in an answer, is to let you know exactly how that $60 billion as part of the recovery package will go to small businesses.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll have more questions for the President of the United States.
Why was that only like one part? What the hell? What the hell is this? Where's the Anderson Cooper one? What did they just micro clip this? Where the fuck is part 2? I'm gonna play these alerts for a second while we look for it.
Mike just subscribed.
Thank you so much. My peepee just subscribed. Thank you so much for the sub. Why the fuck is there no part 2?
My mom pays her workers $12 an hour. If she was to have to pay $15, she says she will have to let go 1/3 of her workforce, and that's just her. Imagine all the other small businesses.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all. This is ridiculous. Why is this like so difficult to find? What if we do this part 2? Anything? There we go.
We've rethought every step you take to get into a new Infinity. From online purchase and leasing to test.
This is a fucking disaster.
Infinity.
Probably gonna speed this part up.
And welcome back. We're live at a CNN Town Hall event at the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with President Joe Biden.
Let's hope this is
We are back. Thanks so much for being here.
Is there a part 3?
Before we get back to the audience, I want to ask just a question about what we've just witnessed. Before the Senate voted to acquit the former president in the impeachment trial, you said you were anxious to see if Republican senators would stand up. Only 7 did. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the rest cowards. Do you agree with her?
I'm not going to call names out. Look, for 4 years, all that's been in the news is Trump. The next 4 years, I want to make sure all the news is the American people. I'm tired of talking about Trump. It's done.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that the former president is, quote, still liable for everything he did while he was in office. If your Department of Justice wanted to investigate him, would you allow them to proceed?
I made it clear that one of the things about one of the most serious pieces of damage done by the last administration was the politicizing of the Justice Department. Any of you who are lawyers know, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, conservative, or liberal, it has been more politicized than any Justice Department in American history. I made a commitment. I will not ever tell my Justice Department.
I mean, but was Donald Trump the one who politicized the Justice Department, or did everybody else politicize the Justice Department? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, honestly, like, listen, we should have investigated Trump the whole time. Totally. 100%. Right? The Mueller investigation, totally reasonable. But it was politicized to fuck. Like, before anything was done, you had Maxine Waters talking about impeachment. You know what I'm saying? So, like, was it all Trump? Was it?
And it's not mine, it's the People's Justice Department, who they should and should not prosecute. Their prosecutorial decision be left to the Justice Department, not me.
I want you to meet Joel Berkowitz from Shorewood. He's a Democrat, a professor of foreign languages and literature at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Joel, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Anderson.
I'm not bad at the literature part, but after 5 years of French, I still can't speak a word, so I apologize.
I'll teach you some Yiddish sometime. How's that?
By the way, I understand a little bit of Yiddish.
I'm sure you do.
It would be a shanda if you didn't. But
more seriously, Mr. President, like millions of my fellow citizens, I was shaken by the attack on the Capitol on January 6th and on our democracy more.
He got off way too much
by your predecessor and his followers.
$15.
While I appreciate efforts being made to bring them to justice, I worry about ongoing threats to our country from Americans who embrace white supremacy and conspiracies that align with it. What can your administration do to address this complex and wide-ranging problem?
It's complex, it's wide-ranging, and it's real. I got involved in
What's the
politics to
problem?
begin with because of civil rights and opposition to white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, and the most dangerous people in America continue to exist. That is the greatest threat to terror in America, domestic terror. And so I would make sure that my Justice Department and the Civil Rights Division is focused.
Bro, listen. The Capitol riots were like pathetic, right? 100%. But not everybody who protested was like a fucking white nationalist. All right, these were people who thought they trusted Trump a lot, unrightfully, in my opinion. They trusted Trump a lot, and he told them that he was robbed, and they believed him. Right? That's how politics. People don't realize it, but most people like follow a particular person that they trust the most mostly because that person identifies or they identify with that person a lot. And then that person may utilize that the wrong way. This isn't a white supremacy thing. What really happened is Trump's presidency was intense. And it came to a boiling point. And now here we are. Like, I don't know, man. It's not like just chill the fuck out. I don't know. It just seems like it's not a white supremacy issue as much as it's like we were too intense. We need to chill. He's just using buzzwords.
Heavily on those very folks, and I would make sure that we, in fact, focus on how to deal with the rise of white supremacy. And you see what's happening in the studies that are beginning to be done, maybe at your university as well, about the impact of former military, former police officers on the growth of white supremacy in some of these groups. You may remember in one of my debates with the former president, I asked him to condemn the Proud Boys. He wouldn't do it. He said, stand by, stand ready, or whatever the phrase exactly was. It is a bane on our existence. It has always been, as Lincoln said, we have to appeal to our better angels. And these guys are not, and women are, in fact, demented. They are dangerous people.
I want you to meet James Lewis, an independent from Milwaukee. He's a labor attorney. James, welcome.
Seems like we kind of generalized there. We kind of treated every riot, or not even riot, or every protester as if they were fucking white supremacist nationalists. It's not exactly positive for unity. There's a fundamental hypocrisy. There's a fundamental hypocrisy in the idea of saying all Trump supporters or everybody who was protesting, they're all racists, white supremacists, right? There's a hypocrisy in saying that, and then also condemning people for saying that all black people are violent, right? Generalizations are harmful. Just in the way that I do not advocate for doing the 1350 meme for black people because it's ridiculous bullshit to generalize. I don't advocate for pretending that all Trump supporters or all people who protested are fucking racist white supremacists. You can't condemn racism based on generalizations and then generalize the group that you want hated. Like, we need to stop with this bullshit. It's so fucking transparent.
James, if I say anything you don't like, let me know right away, will you?
All right, you're all right.
As big as a mountain.
Good evening, President Biden. I was a public defender in Kenosha County when the police shot Jacob Blake. I witnessed the city I worked in burned and devastated, and recently District Attorney Michael Gravely denied to prosecute the police officers responsible. So my question to you is, what will your administration do?
I'm not educated on the Jacob Blake situation, so I really can't give too much information here.
Correct these wrongs that we witnessed not just in Kenosha, but across this country? And what will we do to bridge the gap between communities and their police?
Three things. First of all, I was a public defender as well.
Move on to that point.
I think it's high time that we had public defenders being paid the same as prosecutors. My son, by the way, was a great prosecutor. He was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware, and he was a federal prosecutor before that. And so I'm not condemning all prosecutors, but I am saying that it matters that you have adequate defense and you are able to attract people who, in fact, can live on being able to be that public defender. Number one. Number two, we are pushing very hard, and I think we'll get it done, is the legislation relating to what is appropriate police behavior and studying police behavior and coming down with recommendations that are consistent with the legislation that was put in place as a consequence of all the world seeing one man shoved up against a curb and murdered after 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so there's a number of things relating to everything from no-knock warrants.
That's George Floyd.
And a whole range of things you know. There's legislation that's being introduced separately. I hope it will pass. But thirdly, I think we have to deal with systemic racism that exists throughout society. And one of the things I'm going to recommend there is that we look at an entire panoply of things that affect whether or not people of color primarily are treated differently. And that goes for everything from prosecutorial discretion. You know, as a public defender, and by that I mean, what happens is, it will take too long to go through the whole explanation, but let me try to do it quickly. What happens now is, if you in fact are you arrest someone because they had, and you want to charge them, you can charge them with robbery or armed robbery. If you charge them with armed robbery, you get a lot more time than if you don't charge with robbery. But if you want to make sure that someone who doesn't know much about their representation is able to be done, you engage in prosecutorial misconduct by offering them to plead to essentially, it's not the same, burglary, which gets them 2 years and probation. And so you don't even get a trial. You plead because you don't have adequate representation. You feel like everything's against you, and you're in trouble. When I did the Sentencing Act,
this is an interesting perspective
that was designed to make sure we had the same.
The only reason I say that is because he seems to be going on like a tangent about how it might be bad for prosecutors to suggest plea deals for black people and to see if there's a disproportionate amount. It's weird because like my understanding is like most crimes are like drug-related crimes, and black people go to jail for longer periods of time than white people for drug-related crimes. My understanding is because white people are more likely to take the plea bargain and black people aren't. But when it comes to like more violent or serious crimes, white people are apparently more likely to take the plea deal than black people. So I find it interesting that like making this blanketed idea that taking a plea deal is fundamentally racist when we base our system's implicit bias off of basically black people not taking plea deals. It's just, we're all over the place with how fucking woke we are about systemic racism. I mean, systemic racism exists. My opinion, it's more to do with the denial of opportunity over a period of time. Legally, it's not there anymore, I would say. I don't think that there's a tremendous amount of evidence. It's very difficult when you're dealing with 330 million people making these general statements. But there's definitely an issue that I think the solution will be solved with the access of you know, opportunity, money, UBI. But I don't know. This is a weird, I don't know. Maybe I'm just
time
ranting.
for the same crime. As chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I looked at all 10 federal districts, and we took 6 months to do it, and found out if you were black and you were your first time offense of being accused of burglary, and maybe you committed it, and you were white, and you did the same exact crime. In all 10 districts throughout the United States of America, the person, and don't hold me the exact numbers, but the percentages are right, if you were a first-time white guy, you'd get 2 years. You get 7 years if you were black. So in order to make sure that you could not send people to jail for the same crime, I came up with this sentencing commission, which said that everybody who commits the crime has to receive between, instead of 0 to 20 years, you drastically cut down the number of years you could go to jail, but say you have to, if it's a first-time offense, you have to get sentenced between 1.5 and 3 years, okay? Well, what happens is prosecutors use that as a mechanism to send people to jail, and makes it look like we're dealing with mandatory sentencing, which it wasn't designed to do at all. It was designed to make sure that people were treated fairly. There's much more, I'm sorry to go on. There's much more to talk about, but
we actually have a related question over here. This is Denny Evans, a pastor in Janesville who works as a supervisor for the Juvenile Justice Diversion Program in Rock County. He's an independent, voted for Donald Trump in 2020. He's also a member of the state's 32-member Racial Disparity Task Force created in the wake of the Jacob Blake shooting last summer. Denny, welcome.
Huh. They're really not talking about it. They didn't even reference any of this shit. I'm looking at like a fact checker and they didn't reference it at all.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Defund the police is discussed as an option for reforming policing. However, there are communities where people live in fear, not of the police, but in fear of the violent gangs who commit crimes in those neighborhoods. How can we be sure that we don't over-legislate police officers so that they can't do their job to protect the law-abiding citizens who live in these high-crime neighborhoods, and yet train officers to police with compassion?
By number one,
That's a fair question, man. You know, it's very interesting because I have friends in the New York, the NYPD, and there's like a lot of shit going on right now that makes it difficult for police officers to do their job. And he tells me that like a lot of the young black people in the city don't like the cops, but like he says, these are his words. A lot of the old heads do. Like they like the cops. They understand that like shit's fucked, but like the police are a net gain for society, and that there's a lot of danger. And like we often don't talk about, for whatever reason, we just seem to not really give a fuck about old black people when it comes to talking about anything. It seems like such a hot take that like that we have this idea that like black people hate the cops when like they don't like the cops as much as white people, obviously for obvious and justifiable reasons, but they don't hate the cops. And for whatever reason, we just listen to young black people. We don't listen to any of the older black people. I would argue the backbone of like black communities. We don't listen to them. It's weird. It's weird.
On not defunding the police. We have to put more money in police work. So we have legitimate community policing, and we're in a situation where we change the legislation. No one should go to jail.
Fucking they defund. You know what's crazy? In New York, they actually did a lot of defunding of the police. So what ended up happening, they used to have this program in New York City where if you were homeless, they had a service that could pick you up and bring you to the local shelter. And they discontinued that service because they defunded the police. So now if you're a homeless guy and you can't go, you won't get driven to a shelter if you request it. Like a cop would go like, hey, what's up? And then they'd be like, I request like a movement like from homeless facility or to anywhere on the street to a homeless shelter. Right? Now you have to send them to the hospital and then they'll get discharged once they're fine. And they don't like that because they're just right back out on the street. And it's like defunding the police is dumb as shit.
Drug offense. No one should go to jail for the use of a drug. They should go to drug rehabilitation. Drug rehabilitation, number one. We should be in a position where we change the system of sentencing system to one that relates to a notion of, they should tell you that, is related to making sure that what you do is you focus on making sure that there's rehabilitation. The idea that we don't have people in prison systems learning how to be spending the money, learning how to be mechanics, learning how to be cooks, learning how to have a profession when you get out. The idea that we deny someone who served their time access to Pell Grants, access to housing, access to, right now, as you well know, most places you get out of prison, you get $25 on a bus ticket. You end up back under the bridge exactly where you were before. And
UBI,
the fact is that the concern in many minority communities is black on black, Hispanic on Hispanic, not just. But here's the deal. There has to be much more serious, how can I say, much more serious determination as to what the background and the attitudes of the recruit is, what their views are. There should be much more psychological testing, like you would if you go into the intelligence community. What is it? What are the things that make you respond the way you do? Because there is inherent prejudice built into the system as well. And we also need to provide for, and it's happening, more African-American and more Hispanic police officers. Now, by the way, they don't get it all right either, by a long shot. But every cop, when they get up in the morning and put on that shield, has a right to expect to be able to go home to their family that night. Conversely, every kid walking across the street wearing a hoodie is not a member of a gang and is about to knock somebody off. So it's about education. I'd love to talk to you more about it because it is the answer, in my view, that and education, actually access to education. And one of the things that I talk a lot about, and I'm sorry to go on about this, but it's important, I don't think we can look at our opportunity in the, let's stick with the African-American community for a minute, in terms of the criminal justice system. That is only one small piece of why people are the way they are. You realize, I don't know what home you live in, but if you go ahead and you want to get insurance and you're in a black neighborhood, you're going to pay more for the same insurance I'm going to pay for the exact same home. Your car, you've never had an accident in your car. You live in a black neighborhood, you're going to pay a higher premium in your car. You're going to, so there's...
Yeah, it's because those areas are more dangerous. This is what's so crazy. Because, like, he's not wrong, but it's like, why are they that way? Like, we look so very we look at everything so very shallowly. We're like, in a shallowly, I don't think is a word. But he's like, hey, things are more expensive in black communities. Insurance is more expensive. But why is that? And it's because they're more dangerous. Why are they more dangerous? Because they don't have the access to opportunity, so they turn to violence. It's like, oh my God. If we just took one step deeper into why things were happening, we could come up with real solutions.
So many things that are built in institutionally that disadvantage African Americans and Latinos that we, in fact, I think, and one of the great advantages, I'm sorry, but one of the great advantages, as bad as things are, I keep reading from presidential historians how I've inherited the worst situation since Lincoln, worse than Roosevelt, because economic crisis, political crisis, racial crisis, etc. But the fact is that everyone's gotten
Biden just threw like the victim card out. He's like, Biden was just like, hey, things are as bad as they were during Lincoln, maybe. But that was a weird point to bring up. Very like, woe is me. That was pretty white savior-ish of Biden there.
Close-up look now and seeing what's happened. That kid holding that camera for 8 minutes and 46 seconds awakened the whole world. When I met with his little daughter after he was dead, she said, my daddy's changed the world. Guess what? Not only here in the United States, around the world, people said, whoa, I didn't know that happened. Dr. King, when I got involved in the civil rights movement as a high school student in the early 60s, and you had Bull Connor and his dogs in the late 50s singing on those ladies in their black dresses going to church and little kids and fire hoses ripping their skin off. He said what happened there it was a second emancipation because people in places where there weren't black communities said, that really happens? I didn't believe it. They saw it happen. And so it generated the Voting Rights Act, it generated the Civil Rights Act, and he called it the second emancipation. We have a chance now. I'm
going to be honest with you. Might be a hot take. George Floyd's situation was fucked up, but it wasn't the same as black people getting hosed in the street for being black, right? Like George Floyd was a situation where, and I've said this since the beginning of the summer when this happened, or in the summer when this happened. George Floyd, I really don't think he wasn't targeted for being black, right? He was somebody who committed a crime, and then the police was a fucking worthless idiot and killed him, right? I would say it's murder. He didn't deserve to die at all. But like, it wasn't a race issue. It was like, I would say, a police brutality issue. But the comparison's it's just too much.
Significant change in racial disparities. And I'm going to say something's going to get me in trouble, which I couldn't go through a whole show without doing that. And that is that, think about it. If you want to know where the American public is, look at the money being spent on advertising. Did you ever 5 years ago think every second or third ad out of 5 or 6 you turn on would be biracial couples? No, I'm not being facetious. The reason I'm so hopeful is this new generation.
What the fuck are we talking about?
They're not like us. They're thinking differently. They're more open, and we got to take advantage of it.
I want you to.
I'm sorry.
I want you to meet Luverta Martin, a Democrat from Mequon, sorry. Luverta is a certified nurse midwife. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. President. Our nation's experiences with and through COVID-19 and other recent tragedies have strengthened the foundation of division among Americans. What are your immediate and tangible plans to address how deeply divided we are as a nation?
I take issue with what everybody says about the division. For example, my plan on COVID, 69% of the American people support it. 69. In this state, recent poll, 60%. 60%. 40.
The fuck is he talking to her like that? He's talking to her like she's a fucking idiot. She's like the most well-spoken person that came up on stage. And Joe Biden's like, listen, you fucking bitch. 69%. 420. Loser. Like, chill out, dude. Jesus Christ. This is the most well-spoken person who's talked right now. And you're just like, you're getting so offended.
5% of Trump voters and 55% of Republican voters. The nation is not divided. You go out there and take a look and talk to people. You have fringes on 5% of Republican voters. The nation is not divided. You go out there and take a look and talk to people. You have fringes.
I understand what he's saying. We are divided. My understanding is like we are as divided as we were during like the Civil War. That's my understanding. I remember hearing that from a political friend of mine. Maybe that was an exaggeration. We certainly do have fringes shouting the loudest, but like no, we're pretty divided. We're pretty divided, honestly.
On both ends, but it's not nearly as divided as we make it out to be, and we have to bring it together. You may remember how trouble I got in. I said there were 3 reasons I was running. 1, to restore the soul of the country, decency, honor, integrity, talk about the things that matter to people, treat people with dignity. Secondly, I said to rebuild the backbone of the country, the middle class, and this time bring everybody along and have a chance. And the third reason was to unite the country. Well, in my own primary, I got unite the country. What are you talking about? You cannot function in our system without consensus other than abusing power at the executive level. So I really think there's so many things that we agree on that we don't focus enough on. And that's in large part, I think, because we don't just condemn the things that are so obviously wrong. obviously wrong, that everybody agrees on, the way they were raised. The way we were raised. As my mother would say, if half the things that occurred in the last campaign came out of my mouth, and she'd say as a kid, we'd wash my mouth out with soap. I mean, we have to be more decent and treat people with respect and just decency.
I think I forgot her question. Was she asking how we're going to deal with it? And he just rambled about how he wants to deal with it, but he didn't like ramble about how he's going to deal with it. Like, I'm so fucking confused right now.
Let me ask about a question which does often divide many people in this country: immigration. Your administration, along with congressional Democrats, expected to unveil an immigration reform bill just this week. You want a pathway to citizenship for the roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants. Would you sign any immigration bill if it did not include that, a pathway for the roughly 11 million undocumented?
Yeah, there's a whole range of...
You know, just fundamentally speaking, I think one of the things that we need to change about our country is we need to stop packaging bills together. It's fucking stupid, right? So, like, part of, like, the $1.9 trillion coronavirus bill, where we would get, like, you know, money that we kind of need to get through this pandemic, we put the $15 an hour minimum wage in there. The reason why marijuana is not legal in New York is because everybody feels the need to package everything. We need to stop packaging things. We need to stop holding people ransom. We should have a coronavirus relief bill already. It shouldn't be packaged with 70 other fucking things. We need to stop packaging things. Every bill should be individual. Because now, hopefully, we lose the 15 an hour thing, but then we're not going to get any money. Like, we're not going to get any, whatever the fuck it's called. What am I thinking of? You know the word I'm thinking of. We're not going to get a check. You know
things that relate to immigration, including the whole idea how you deal with, you know, what confuses people is you talk about refugees.
Stimulus. Thank you.
You talk about undocumented. You talk about people who are seeking asylum. And you talk about people who are coming from the that are coming from camps being held around the world. And there are 4 different criteria for being able to come to the United States. The vast majority of the people, those 11 million undocumented, they're not Hispanics. They're people who came on a visa, was able to buy a ticket to get in a plane and didn't go home. They didn't come across the Rio Grande.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm reading a fact checker, and that statement's false. I actually have a fact checker up. They are apparently mostly Hispanic. This is just a fact checker I'm reading right now. I'm just letting you know. They're mostly Hispanic. I'll find it. It's just like weird. Like, I think most people who came here overstayed their visa. Biden wrongfully claimed the vast majority of immigrants living in the United States illegally are not Hispanics, but people who came on a visa and didn't go home. Most of the unauthorized population came to the U.S. illegally from Mexico and other Latin American nations. So that's that.
Excuse me.
By the way, can we just talk about this? Can we honestly talk about this? Look at this. This is the list of things that Joe Biden has spoke out. Like, these are all the incorrect things he said in this hour. This is pretty along the lines of what Trump would say. No, look at how fucking long this is. This is all the things he lied about or spoke in like poorly about in his fucking 1 hour talk. You seeing this shit? This is a fucking huge list. We gave Trump so much shit for lying a lot, which he deserved. Like, look at this shit. This is insane. Fucking insane. Holy fuck! You know, I'm starting to think that I always knew Trump got a raw deal, but I'm starting to think it was worse than we thought. I'm honestly starting to think it's worse than we thought. Joe Biden's being walked around here like a puppy. 15 questions about coronavirus so he can answer them over and over again. This is ridiculous. Biden's a fucking idiot. And then when they contested him, they're like, "Oh, Biden, did you know that what you said about $15 an hour minimum wage is wrong?" And he's like, Pinocchio's to that. We're holding this motherfucker's hand through the thing. We're not giving him any shit.
Sorry, that's the Irish in me. But all kidding aside, so there are a lot of things, and sorry, that's the Irish in me. But all kidding aside, so there are a lot of things that relate. But I think that we can no longer look. You've heard, even if you're not involved in politics at all, you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times. And matter of that, everyone is entitled to be treated with decency, with dignity. Everyone is entitled to that. And we don't do that now for the first time in American history. If you're seeking asylum, meaning you're being persecuted, you're seeking asylum, you can't do it from the United States. You used to come, have an asylum officer determine whether or not you met the criteria and send you back. If you, in fact, but you can't even do that. You got to seek asylum from abroad.
But just to be clear, though, I know you're going to be announcing stuff later this week, or that's what I've heard. You do want a pathway to citizenship for...
What the fuck is he talking about? It's a good thing that people who want to seek asylum don't have to seek asylum from the United States. What the fuck is he talking about? Most asylum seekers aren't seeking asylum on proper grounds. The biggest problem is that they're coming here to mostly escape economic oppression. They're not actually coming here based on the criteria. And they're going in the system for like 2 or 3 years. It takes a long time to go through the court system. And what happens is we do catch and release, right? There is like the best estimates are that 75% of people show up to their court cases. It's anywhere from 60 to 75%. A quarter of people seeking asylum, most of which is unjustifiable, don't show up to the court cases. And they just end up in America illegally. That's a problem.
For roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants, and that would be essential in any bill for you.
Well, yes. But by the way, if you came along and said to me, in the meantime, we can work out a system whereby we're going to...
And I've said it before. Like, I think we should focus on enriching those countries, right? So we go to like fucking the Middle East for oil all the time, right? But we won't help out Central and South America because they have no resource. Like, well, maybe we should start helping them out economically, making their country safer to live in, and we'll see less people come here illegally, right? We'll see more people like want to stay in their country.
To allow refugees, 125,000 refugees into the United States on a yearly basis. It was as high as 250,000. Trump cut it to 5,000. Come with me into Sierra Leone. Come with me into parts of Lebanon. Come with me around the world and see people piled up in camps, kids dying, no way out, refugees fleeing from persecution. We, the United States, used to do our part. We were part of that. Send me your huddled masses. Come on. And so I would, if you had a refugee bill by itself, I'm not suggesting that, but there's things that I would deal by itself, but not at the expense of saying I'm never going to do the other. There is a reasonable path to citizenship. And it shows up, one of the reasons why we have been able to compete with the rest of the world so well is most of our major competitors are xenophobic. I remember you questioned me when I came back from China. And I said, I predict within less than a year, they're going to end their one China policy. And I got clobbered by saying, because Biden didn't talk about the fact that how immoral it was. And it was when we were running against the Republican ticket led by Mitt Romney, a fine guy.
You just talked to China's president.
Yes, for 2 hours.
What about the Uyghurs? What about the
Uyghurs? We must speak up for human rights. It's who we are. We can't. My comment to him was, and I know him well, and he knows me well. We're a 2-hour conversation.
You talked about this too.
I talked about this too. And that's not so much refugee, but I said, look, Chinese leaders, if you know anything about Chinese history, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. So vastly overstated. The central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. And he uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. I point out to him, no American president can be sustained as a president if he doesn't reflect the values of the United States. And so the idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the way, he said he gets it. Culturally, there are different norms that each country and their leaders are expected to follow. But my point was that when I came back from meeting with him, traveling 17,000 miles with him, when I was vice president, he was the vice president. That's how I got to know him so well, at the request of President Hu, not a joke, his predecessor, President Hu, and President Obama wanted us to get to know one another because he was going to be the president. And I came back and said they're going to end their one-child policy because they're so xenophobic, they won't let anybody else in, and more people are retired than working. How can they sustain economic growth when more people are retired?
When you talk to him, though, about human rights abuses, is that as far as it goes in terms of the U.S., or is there any actual repercussions for China?
Well, there will be repercussions for China, and he knows that. What I'm doing is making clear that we, in fact, are going to continue to reassert our role as spokespersons for human rights at the UN.
So I want, this is, in this video, it's very interesting because a lot of conservatives are taking Biden out of context, saying that he doesn't give a shit about like that the immigrant, like the Muslim internment camps and whatnot. Now, obviously, this isn't a very strong camp stance. He's not exactly fighting hard against it. But like, this isn't him advocating for it. He's just using his words selectively so that he doesn't piss off China, but he's still saying that he condemns it. So it's not great, but it's not terrible. So it's bizarre. People are taking him so out of context. It's rather ignorant.
And other agencies that have an impact on their attitude. China is trying very hard to become the world leader. And to get that moniker and to be able to do that, they have to gain the confidence of other countries. And as long as they're engaged in activity that is contrary to basic human rights, it's going to be hard for them to do that. But it's much more complicated. I shouldn't try to talk China policy in 10 minutes on television here.
Well, let me bring it back to the United States. I want you to meet Jocelyn Fish,
She's really trying to be very careful about it.
Jocelyn is the director of marketing for Community Theater. Jocelyn, welcome. Your question.
Hello. Good evening.
Ew, director of marketing for Community Theater. Sounds like a lesbian.
Student loans are crushing my family, friends, and fellow Americans.
Me too.
The American dream.
Jocelyn, welcome. Your question.
Hello. Good evening, Mr. President. Student loans are crushing my family, friends, and fellow Americans.
Me too.
How?
The American dream is to succeed, but how can we fulfill that dream when debt is many people's only option for a degree? We need student loan forgiveness beyond the potential $10,000 your administration has proposed. We need at least a $50,000 minimum. What will you do to make that happen?
I will not make that happen. It depends.
That was aggressive.
Depends on whether or not you go to a private university or a public university. It depends on the idea that I say to a community, I'm going to forgive the debt, the billions of dollars of debt for people who have gone to Harvard and Yale and Penn and schools. My children, I went to a great school, I went to a state school. But is that going to be forgiven rather than use that money to provide for early education for young children who come from disadvantaged circumstances? But here's what I think. I think everyone...
Yeah, no, here's my perspective on loan forgiveness, right? Is like, I'm fine. This is the way that I think that we should approach loan forgiveness. It's like an Andrew Yang kind of a thing. We should implement like some kind of like a 10 for 10 program. So you pay 10% of your wages for 10 years, regardless of what you have. And then your shit's eliminated, right? The government takes care of the rest. And then from that point on, the government reduces the amount of money people have to pay. Most schools are government subsidized, and so it's like schools are very expensive. For one, because one of the things I want to do is like reduce the amount of requirements. Like, if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a fucking basic doctor, you need to take like STEM classes. I feel like you don't necessarily need, like, we need to reduce the difficulty of getting degrees. Like, we need to reduce the irrelevant information that you can, it's like, hey, you go to a school, oh, you want to be a math major? Well, why don't you also you have to make sure you can write a fucking 30-page essay. Why? You want to be a doctor? You need to make sure that you understand the specific, you need to go to a fucking calculus class. That's one of the problems. Another problem is that we let schools charge too much, even though they get subsidies from the government. We need to tell schooling, hey, listen, you need to get your costs, specifically administration costs, in line with other schools, or we're not going to give you subsidies. And then all of a sudden they'll be like, oh, we can reduce the price. That's all we got to do. It's crazy. Make it so that people go to school for things that are relevant to their degree, and get schools to stop taking government money and screwing people by overpricing shit. Those are the two biggest things that we need to deal with. Nobody's talking about that shit. Nobody's talking about it. We need to reset the loan debt, and we need to get these prices under control and get kids to stop going to school. And then we need to push more people into fucking trades. Because as we move forward, the only jobs that are going to be left are either like well, not only jobs, but we're going to see like more math jobs, and then we're going to still see more trade school jobs. We need more like mechanics. We need more HVAC workers. We need more plumbers. We need more carpenters. We need jobs that are not easily replaced with technology, because right now it's difficult to develop some kind of technology that can be a plumber, because plumbing is everything's a little different. Technology is great for basic menial tasks like flipping burgers or cooking French fries. It's not good for getting up in like ventilation systems and dealing with very specific problems that aren't routine. So we need to push more people towards trades, and we need to get the fucking school system under control. But like, we never talk about that. We never talk about that. Those are real solutions. We jerk each other off. It's almost like we think as Americans, progressives and conservatives think we have infinite amounts of fucking money and nobody's looking for real solutions to problems. They're band-aiding them for like fucking clout. I don't understand it. Like life is complicated, but the solutions aren't. The complicated part of solutions in life is fucking implementing them for some reason. It's crazy.
Everyone should be able to go to community college for free. For free.
Why? Why should everybody be able to go to community college for free? For what? Do I think that community colleges should be government subsidized? Sure, fine. It makes sense. But like, why do you need to go to community college for free? It doesn't make any sense. At all. Telling people they can go to community college for free, all that really does is it removes personal accountability from going to college. Okay, you should be going to college if you can benefit it. So like, if you make it free to go to college, everybody's gonna be like, let's just go to college for fucking what? Then they're gonna get out and not use it. It doesn't make any sense.
That costs $9 billion, and we should pay for it.
No,
and the tax policies we have now, we should be able to pay for it. You spend almost that much money as a break for people who own racehorses. And I think any family making under $125,000 whose kids go to a state university they get into, that should be free as well. And the thing I do in terms of student debt that's accumulated is provide for changing the existing system now for debt forgiveness if you engage in volunteer activity. For example, if you're teaching school, after 5 years, you'd have $50,000 of your debt forgiven. If you worked in a battered women's shelter,
why?
If you worked and so on. So you'll be able to forgive debt.
What? What the fuck? What are these? Are like the weirdest solutions. I mean, I guess they're incentive programs. That's weird though. When it comes to teaching, we don't really need more teachers. We just need better paid teachers. And when it comes to maybe the working in battered women's shelters stuff makes sense. But overall, I'd say that we should just be paying our social workers more. I don't know. This is just like weird approaches.
Yeah. Thirdly, I'm going to change the position that we have now to allow for debt forgiveness because it's so hard to calculate, whereby you can now, depending on how much you make and what program you saw, you can work off that debt by the activity you have, and you cannot be charged more than X% of your take-home pay so that it doesn't affect your ability to buy a car, own a home, et cetera. Each of my children graduated from school. I mortgaged the house. I was listed as the poorest man in Congress for, not a joke, for over 30 years. And, but I was able to borrow, I bought a home I spent a lot of time working on, and I was able to sell it for some profit. But my oldest son graduated after undergraduate and graduate school with $136,000 in debt after working 30 hours a week during school. My other son went to Georgetown and Yale Law School, graduated $142,000 in debt, and he worked for the parking service down in Washington. My daughter went to Tulane University and then got a master's at Penn. She graduated $103,000 in debt. So I don't think anybody should have to pay for that, but I do think you should be able to work it off. My daughter's a social worker. My other son ran the World Food Program USA, and so on. They didn't qualify. But my point is, I understand the impact of the debt, and it can be debilitating. And I think there's a whole question about what universities are doing. They don't need more skyboxes. What they need is more money invested in making. So that's why I provide, for example, $80 billion, $70 billion over 10 years for HBCUs and other minority-serving universities, because they don't have the laboratories to be able to bring in those government contracts that can train people in cybersecurity or other future endeavors that pay well. But I do think that in this moment of economic pain and strain, that we should be eliminating.
You know what's interesting? Oh, God, it's so silly of me. He's talking about HBCUs needing more like resources so that they can have access to things like, what the fuck did he say? Basically computer shit. The reason that's difficult for like, well, I guess let's speak it like generally. The reason HBCUs are like don't have access to these things, I would argue, is because the students going to a lot of these places don't have access to the education to build them up to that point. This is like one of the problems. Like we talk about this a lot. Like we talk about these outcomes. We're like, yo, we're not seeing a lot. There's really not a lot of black people go into STEM fields. And we think it's because the black colleges or the college that like they're not offering these programs, which they may not be. But more than anything else, it's because they're not afforded the actual foundational education. Like you're better off implementing preschool. Fucking massive. Preschools are huge. Getting kids into preschool, universal preschool would make me come. I would literally come if we had like universal preschool, because that drastically increases the likeliness that you're going to get through school and get a good education. That would be profoundly positive for black communities. Let's talk about access. Like your developmental stage is when you're going to learn. Once you get like out of that stage, you're dumb. I'm dumb as shit. I'm getting dumber every day. Okay. I really couldn't be retrained at this point. Maybe I could if I really tried, but like once you start getting to a certain age, it gets difficult. So we need to strike while the iron is hot. You want black kids to be in STEM fields? Stop fucking around with their education when they're like in college, or before college rather. Middle schools, high schools, preschools. Start getting them the building blocks of an education so that they have a better access to this shit. We're sitting here talking about giving money to HBCUs. It's probably not a bad idea, but that's not like where we really need the money. Okay?
Interest on.
I guess I shouldn't have said I would come for universal preschool. That sounds really bad now that you guys are making fun of me for it. I didn't think of it like that. Oh my god. I was talking about how amazingly impactful universal preschool would be to like a foundational education. On
the debts that are accumulated, number one, and number two, I'm prepared to write off the $10,000 debt, but not 50.
Mr. President, let me ask you,
because I don't think I have the authority to do it by sign of a pen.
You have, over the years, over your career, you've already spent a great deal of time at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, except now you're living there and you're president. It's been 4 weeks. What's it like? How's it different?
I get up in the morning and look at Joe and say, where the hell are we? No,
I wouldn't doubt
look,
that. I would not doubt that he's doing that.
You know, I've only been president for 4 weeks. And sometimes, because things are moving so fast, not because of burden, it feels like 4 years. It's not because of the burden. It's because there's so much happening that you're constantly focusing on one problem or opportunity, one right ad seriatim. But what happens is that it's what I didn't realize. I had been in the Oval Office 100 times as vice president, or more than that, every morning for the initial meetings. But I had never been up in the residence. And one of the things that I don't know about you all, but I was raised in a way that you didn't look for anybody to wait on you. And it's where I find myself extremely self-conscious. They're wonderful people, work at the White House. But someone, standing there and, making sure hands me my suit coat. Or
you'd never been in the residence of the White House?
I only been upstairs in the yellow room, the Oval upstairs.
I don't know. I've never been there. But
no. Look, the people down there are wonderful, and I find that, like my dad. You've heard me say this before. My dad used to say, everybody's entitled to be treated with respect. And it's interesting how decent and incredible these folks are.
Is it different than you expected it to be in some way?
I don't know what I ever expected it to be. It is different in that, get in trouble here.
All right, Joe, I got to take a piss. I Joe.
I wanted to be president, not to live in the White House, but to be able to make the decisions about the future of the country. And so living in the White House, as you've heard other presidents who have been extremely flattered to live there, it's a little like a gilded cage in terms of being able to walk outside and do things. The vice president's residence was totally different. You're on 80 acres, overlooking the rest of the city, and you can walk out. There's a swimming pool. You can walk off a porch in the summer and jump in the pool and go into work. You can ride a bicycle around and never leave the property and work out. But the White House is very different. And I feel a sense of, I must tell you, a sense of history about it.
This is
John Meacham, who you know.
Dude, this town hall has been such...
presidential historians.
Like, he got so easy.
Helped me I asked my brother, who's good at this, to...
They took it so easy
set up the Oval Office for me.
Such bullshit.
Because it all happens within 2 hours, literally. They move everything out, move something. And it was interesting to hear these historians talk about what what other presidents have gone through and the moments and who are the people who stepped up to the ball and who's the people who didn't. And what you realize is the most consequential thing for me is, although I've known this watching 7 presidents who I got to know fairly well, is I always in the past looked at the presidency in the terms of Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt and George Washington and how could they're superhuman. But I had to remind myself that they're really fine men that I knew well the last 7 presidents. And at least there are people who I knew well enough to know that I could play on the same team with. So it took away the sense of, this is my God. You know, I'm not Abraham Lincoln. I'm not Franklin Roosevelt. How do I deal with these problems?
Have you picked up the phone and called any former president yet?
Yes, I have.
Do you want to say who?
No, I don't. They're private conversations. But by the way, all of them have, with one exception, picked up the phone and called me as well.
I know you don't want to talk about them, but
no, but look, it's a greatest honor I think an American can be given from my perspective. And I literally pray that I have the capacity.
I pray that I don't piss myself.
Do for the country what you all
I gotta
deserve
fucking
need to
piss.
be done. But one thing I learned after 8 years with Barack is no matter how consequential the decision, I got to be the last person in the room with him literally on every decision. I could make a recommendation.
I gotta pee so bad.
But I walked out of the room and it was all him, man. Nobody else.
Okay.
Buck stops there.
That's crazy.
And
I'm gonna piss
that's
my
when
pants.
you pray for making sure you're looking at the impact on the country and a little bit of good luck.
I'm gonna piss
in the
in my
judgment you're
pants.
making.
Mr. President, thank you so much.
Thank you
for
so
joining
much,
us
Mr.
in
President.
This, town hall. We want to thank
This
our
was a
audience for being
great
here
town
for their
hall,
questions. We
guys.
also
I'm
wanna
just
thank
gonna
the
piss my
Paps Theater for
pants. Blah blah blah. Nobody asked him about climate change. Funny enough, which is really interesting. We didn't ask him about climate change. We asked him about the coronavirus and 15 an hour minimum wage. Weird. I gotta piss really bad. I will be right back, and then we're gonna do some more content.